Thank you very much for inviting me to facilitate a very important conversation. We are at a pivotal point in Alberta history, and the results of this leadership race will shape history as we move forward. We are fortunate that all the NDP leadership candidates are here with us today, both in person and virtually, to discuss their vision and their platforms for our province. We have a lot of things to talk about and we have so little time. I think we're done at noon, so I'm going to be the bad guy today. I'm going to be timing candidates at 2 minutes, and I'd like to give you a 30-second signal if you just kind of keep an eye. That way you can round out your thought and maybe do it as efficiently as possible. And Mr. Nenshi, you are joining us virtually, and I'm just going to politely interrupt you at about 30 seconds so that you can gather your thoughts. The ATA has randomly chosen who gets to start us off today. And so, Kathleen Ganley, if you could start us off today with opening remarks, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you very much. I'm so excited to be in this room with amazing educators today. For those of you who haven't met me, my name is Kathleen Ganley. I am a lawyer, I am a mother, I am a bit of a nerd. Some might say a lot of a nerd. I know the plots to every episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation. My vision for education is informed by two things. First, I have a 6-year-old daughter, and I want her to have the same opportunities growing up here that I had. Second, I think that public education is the great equalizer, and I think that equality is incredibly important. It builds a better society, it builds a more just society, and it builds a better democracy. So I think we fix things with 3 solutions. So right now, we have the lowest per student funding in the country. The only reason that doesn't turn up in our results is the incredible work of all of you here in this room and your colleagues right across this province. My commitments to you are to build more schools, so you're not teaching on the gym stage anymore, to fund for both class size and complexity so that every student has a chance to learn, and to review curriculum on regular, mandated timelines and take the politics right out of it. But as a precondition to any of that, we have to win. So, my offer on that is that in the last election, we did a very good job of attacking the UCP. Some might say too good a job. This time around, what we have to do differently is give them a real, concrete offer on the economy, and that is what I bring to the table. We cannot fail in this endeavor. All of our children are counting on us, and my daughter is counting on us. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathleen. We'll have Jody Callahoo-Stonehouse next, please.
Are we on? Beautiful. Tansitoya. Kapapamas Gamganakas Gweo Natsigasun, Otsinia Michelle First Nation. It's good to be with you all, and I want to applaud you in your work, seeing that you are underfunded and under-resourced. As when I graduated from MRU, I spent time as a rehabilitation assistant in Morley. So at that time, I got to understand the process, Alberta education, curriculum, and it is a nightmare. The work that you, let alone the kids, but the bureaucracy, the underfundment, the underinvestment, and the under-recognition of how hard it is to be in a classroom with 40 kids with complex needs, and you don't have the supports. And, we talk about integration, which is so integral to who we are as Albertans, but we need to support those children and those teachers adequately. Children are precious, and so are the people who work with them, which is you. What you do matters because we are creating our retirement plan. Our investment is these children. They are going to be looking after us, and we are not taking care of them. So we have to do multiple things better. We have to ensure that teachers have the supports they need, whether it's curriculum development, that we are connecting with the communities, the local knowledge, whether it's a rural or urban space. We have to make sure that we're not only doing curriculum, that we have the TAs, the RAs, the counselors, all the folks that roundabout support our children. Early intervention, prevention. We need to have literate people in our province. We must do better. Along with our policy and investment, we have to make sure that our teachers are being paid adequately, that we're being competitive with the way we pay not only our teachers, but also those who support the teachers. I am very much a supporter of the work that you do. Public education, Catholic education matters in this province. The work that you do matters because our children matter. We have 3 precious resources in our province: water, our resources, which build our economy so we can pay our bills, and our children. We have to do better at taking care of our children. Hi.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Serena.
Next will be Gil McGowan.
All right, Gil.
You may have heard that I'm a union guy. And so it fills my heart to see a room filled with so much energy. So welcome to the political action officers, welcome to the communication officers, welcome to the presidents. It's an honor being able to speak to you about such an important issue. Like many others, I am a product of Alberta's public education system. I'm also a father of 3 kids who just went through public schools here in Alberta. And as president of the Alberta Federation of Labor, I also have the honor of representing many of the people who you work with every day as support workers in an education system. And so this morning, we are going to talk about all the things that make public education work. And we're going to talk about all the things that are standing in the way of making it work. So we'll talk about funding. We're going to talk about class size. We're going to talk about wages. We're going to talk about pensions. We're going to talk about complexity. We're going to talk about your partners in education and the need for the wraparound services so that you can do your jobs. But I want to start this morning by talking about something which I think is actually even more foundational, and that is the attack on public education. Because the UCP isn't our parents' conservatives. They are not just a conservative party that's worried about spending and deficits and debt. They're not even a party that wants to break the system to privatize it. We've seen that story before. What we're dealing with is something much more profound, and it started south of the border, but it's come up here, and it is a war on the whole idea of public education. So as a candidate, as a leader, and eventually as Premier, my commitment to you would not be just to support public education with funding, not just to build new schools, not just to fund, just to support your work and curriculum. We have to become the party of full-throated support for public education because they are trying to politicize it, tear it apart, to transform our society, and we cannot let them.
Sarah Hoffman, the floor is yours.
Thanks so much, everybody. It's great to see so many of you here today. I see friends from Sherwood Park and Lethbridge and Calgary and Edmonton. Anyone here from High Prairie School Division? Shoot. That was where I grew up. My parents, my dad was a principal and my mom taught kindergarten in Canuso, so High Prairie School Division. And then before that, they met at St. Albert, at that time Protestant. Anyone St. I know there's St. Albert Public here. Yeah, there we go. Awesome. So public education is why I literally exist. My parents wouldn't have met if it weren't for the staff room conversations that happened. And I really respected my parents and everything that they offered to our community, and I wanted to follow in their footsteps. So when I finished high school in 1997 and I told them I wanted to be a teacher, what do you think they said? They said, don't do it. They said the politics in Alberta is too nasty. They'd just both been through 5% rollbacks. My dad's 5 highest earning years weren't the last 5 years he was a principal. When he passed away, he told me how upset he still was because it was going to impact what he left behind for my mom through his pension. And they took those 5% rollbacks because they were promised that it would save their colleagues' jobs, but it didn't. They ended up laying off those EAs. My dad and the custodian took every other light bulb out of the school to try to save a salary for one. And it was a very dark time in public education. But for those of you who know me, you know I'm a little bit stubborn. So I took the scenic route, but I did become a teacher, and I did also do a master's in education. I got my education degree and my BA at MA-MEd. And it was through that time studying education that I really got to know so many activists, because a lot of us were going to protests. We were going to protest about tuition. We were going to protest about cuts to public education. We were going to protest about wars that were unethical happening all over the world. And that's where I realized that there was room for activists in politics as well. So I ended up running for the Edmonton Public School Board on a bold platform to keep schools open. And people said I couldn't win. I was running against an incumbent. But not only did we win with 70% of the vote, and those schools are still open today. And then in 2015, I ran right here in this riding, Edmonton-Glenora, against an incumbent Conservative cabinet minister. People said I couldn't win, but not only did we win with 70% of the vote. And I'm so proud to be working with so many of you here in this room to protect public, Catholic, and Francophone schools. I might have a few different things to say from my colleagues on some of the other options that are available here. So I look forward to your questions. I want to make sure that we're bolstering public, Catholic, and Francophone education. And if charter schools want to pretend to be public schools, I will welcome them into the public system, and they can become public schools. But we shouldn't be giving 100% of the funding for schools that aren't public schools.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Nahed Nenshi is joining us virtually from New York.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you in particular to the organizers for allowing me to join you all virtually today. I had a long-standing work commitment to be out of the province this week, but I really wanted a chance to be able to spend some time with you and with my colleagues across the table here. Now, unfortunately, the incoming audio is not great, so I can't hear a lot of what they're saying, but I have heard a lot of things that, frankly, are incredibly important for us to think about as we think about why public education is not being supported the way it needs to be being supported now. So for me, one of the critical issues is the fact that we simply have, as Gil said, a government that does not value public education, whether by malice or by competence. They've allowed the system to get to a point where it's failing in a very serious way. And I've been very grateful over the last 2 years for the time I've been able to spend with the Alberta Teachers Association, with President Schilling and his team. I've met many of you at SumCon, at the Endless Skies Teachers Convention. I've spent a ton of time speaking with teachers about political strategy, also about this horrific curriculum, the fact that the PATs have been canceled because the province is embarrassed at how badly they think the students will do because they've rolled out their curriculum so poorly. These are things that we shouldn't be able to get away with in this society. You know, I launched my campaign on
You
purpose,
have 30 seconds, Mr. Nenshi.
standing in front of the elementary school that I went to. Because if not for public education, my family, which grew up in deep poverty, would never have been able to succeed in the way that we've been able to succeed. And my most recent conversation with the Advocacy Committee of the Calgary teachers helped me understand that things are bad, but they are so much worse in the last year or two in terms of funding, of course, in terms of overall respect for the work that teachers do, in terms of educational assistance, and so many other things. And I'm really looking forward to our conversation on how we can put public education back as the cornerstone of everything we do in this province.
Thank you so much. So obviously, funding of education is uppermost of mind in this room, and I think across the province. Alberta is world-renowned as a top performer in public education. Yet Stats Canada shows we have the lowest level of per-pupil spending in Canada. How do you explain this, and what would your approach be if elected as Premier to funding to ensure public education in Alberta remains high quality? We're going to start with Jody.
Thank you for that question, and it's shameful and embarrassing that that is the lived reality that we're experiencing in the richest province in the country, which means as government, we need to be listening to our boards, the experts who tell us and negotiate with us what it is going to cost us to ensure that we are investing capital adequately, that we have the schools, that we have the support, and that we are paying competitive wages to ensure that we are recruiting not only the best teachers, but also the language therapists, the occupational therapists, speech and language, all of the folks who help build the system around supporting children so they thrive and are excellent. So it's about investing in you so that way our children thrive. So yes, it's negotiations with your board.
All right, thank you so much. Gil, would you like to respond?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks very much for the question. I released my K-12 education platform yesterday at a Zoom webinar, and in my platform and in my remarks last night, the first point I made was about funding. And what I said is that the fact that Alberta, arguably the richest province in the country, the fact that we have the lowest rate of per pupil spending is not an accident. It is a feature rather than a bug of the UCP's approach to public education. And it goes to the point that I made in my introductory remarks. This is a government and a party that wants public education to fail. So it's not just the old conservative approach of counting pennies or even underfunding the system to justify privatization. This is an outright war on public education. The UCP and their supporting organizations like Take Back Alberta, who have put a target on public education and school board elections next year, like their counterparts south of the border, they actually see public education as the cornerstone of a progressive society. And they're right, but they don't want a progressive society. That's the point, right? And so that's why I say that our priority, we'll never get proper funding out of this government. I hope people understand that. We will never get proper funding for public education out of this government because they simply don't believe it. Not only don't they not believe in public education, they actively want to destroy it. And so in order to protect public education in this province and everything that it does for our individuals, for our communities, and for our economy, we have to get rid of the UCP. That's just full stop. And so as leader of the NDP and eventually as premier, I would launch a full-throated campaign in support of public education, and that an important part of that campaign would be to help Albertans understand what the UCP is really up to, because it's not just funding cuts. It's a bigger vision. It's this MAGA North vision that people have to understand that this is existential, right? And I'm not sure a lot of people fully understand that. They haven't realized that what's happening in Florida, what's happening in Texas, is starting to happen here. Until we name it and shame it and end it, then it's going to continue.
I want to point out you have 2 minutes, and I will continue to keep you to time.
Sorry.
So thank you.
Sorry.
Sarah, if you could take the floor now for 2 minutes.
Sure. Yeah, thank you so much, Serena. And I just want to take a moment to reflect on when the COVID pandemic first hit, what was the first staff group they went after? Your EAs. They wanted to make life more expensive for you, more difficult for you, and they wanted to try to pass a bill onto the federal government. But they didn't realize that those EAs weren't doing important work in supporting all of you and supporting your kids too. So this has been by design, it's been intentional. They also at the same time were cutting PUF funding, which I know has had a huge impact on all of you, and it will have an even bigger impact when those kids make their way through the system. So this has been by design, like Gil says. And what I will do to fix it is I will restore PUF funding. In fact, I'll work with you to make it better than it was. The problem was that it used to cut off after kindergarten. Well, let's instead find a way to extend more supports through Division 1, because we know that not every kid goes to kindergarten. Those who do don't often get coded until they're halfway through the year. Let's find ways to make sure we have more support through Div 1 to make sure kids are ready for the K-12 experience. The class size reporting was also by design. Let's not tell people how big your classes are. Let's not report on complexity. So I'll work with you to make sure that we do that, and that we make sure that we have, Tatiana forgot the e-transfer. Let's make sure that we are properly supporting you and creating transparent and open reporting on what's happening in our classrooms, because I want to report on it, because as Premier, I want to make it better, and I want to work with you to demonstrate to the public that we have made it better. So Absolutely, we need to put forward bold policy, which includes cutting the funding for charter schools and instead encouraging them to become public, Catholic, or Francophone. And the same with private schools that charge excessive tuitions. Strathcona, Tweedsmuir, there's no reason why they need to be receiving public funding for the education programming they're offering there. I want to make sure that we give that money to public schools.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Naheed Nenshi, you have 2 minutes.
We can talk a lot about how we got here. And, you know, whether it is by design or just through sheer incompetence of the current UCP government. To me, it is important that people understand the impacts of these decisions more. And certainly the conversations that I've been having with teachers across the province over the last 2 years, and particularly over the last several weeks, have been nothing short of shocking. You know, from the grade 4 teacher who told me that she's got a student with such complex behavioral needs that he must be within arm's length of a grown-up at all times. But she's the only one in the room. So she has to be within arm's length of her one student, while the other 39 students in her grade 4 classroom are suffering. Or the other who told me he feels so lucky because he actually gets an EA for his complicated students for a half hour twice a week. Clearly, we have allowed crazy things to happen because of the lack of funding of public education. So part of this is what I call a problem solved by money. It's pretty straightforward. We need more cash in the system, both on the capital side to build schools, to build classrooms, and on the operating side to hire teachers, educational assistants, and others to be able to do the work. So money is the critical issue here, and we have to make priorities in government to fund the things that matter. And public education, because it's such a large budget, it's often seen by governments as something, well, if we kind of cap it a little bit, we'll be fine. Well, we won't be fine anymore. The good news is when you're mayor, you don't have any money, and you got to go find money. That really is your job, and I'm pretty good at it. So we've got to find the funding.
Mr. Nenshi.
But I'm sure we'll talk about this as well going forward. But the other issue is real respect. Respect for people who work in the system, who can tell us what's working and what isn't working, and helping us understand the only reason we have those outstanding results is because teachers are doing it on their own backs, giving up their health, their professionalism to be able to help those students succeed. I value it and I'm grateful for it, but you shouldn't have to do it.
Thank you so much. Kathleen, would you like to take the floor for 2 minutes, please?
Thank you. So how do I explain the dichotomy between the fact that we have the lowest per pupil funding in Canada and our results? It's you. It's you in this room, and it's your colleagues across this province. It's you buying granola bars for your students. It's you taking extra time in your day. It's you giving more than you should ever have to give. And I want to thank you for that. But I think we also need to recognize that this isn't fair and it's not sustainable. We cannot build an education system off the caring of the people in it. We have to build it to succeed for the long run. So how do we do that? Well, I think it starts with funding, but it also requires that we measure what class sizes are, and that we measure complexity. Complexity is something we have to fund for. I spoke to a principal who lives in my riding. They have, for their entire school, one full-time EA. And they have a kid who's a tube feed, right? So that child requires the full attention of that EA. There's no one else for the whole rest of the school. That is a huge problem, and it is a problem that is solved by investing in funding. We also need to build more schools. We need to work on modernizing our curriculum. But really, what we need to do is support that complexity in the classroom because it is affecting all of our children.
Great, thank you so much. So the next portion of this program is an open forum, so anyone can start off the discussion and I can moderate if you're not playing nice, but I know you will. So anyone can jump in.
Beautiful. One of the policies that I put forward was the Alberta Children's Act. And what that is, it's about looking at children holistically. It's not just about education. It's also about nutrition. It's also about our children in care. We had 81 children die in our province that were in care in 2022. That's 81 unnecessary preventable deaths. So when we think about educating our children, it's just not your job, it's all of our jobs. So our investment in children has to be broader, and it has to be a commitment by us as your leaders.
I think that's a great point, and I would add to it that we need to think about things in the longer term, right? Governments make cuts to education because it's short-term thinking, right? They're thinking about what's happening right now, not what might happen in the future. But we don't know what we are robbing from ourselves, right? We don't know whether one of those kids, if they were properly supported to learn, could have gone on to cure some sort of cancer, could have made progress on global warming. There's so much that we don't know about what we're taking away from ourselves. And so we really need to see education as part of our future and part of our economy. And I think that most people are there. I just think that we need to give them that offer and get out there and talk to them about it.
I think we all agree that we have to start putting our money where our mouth is when it comes to funding public education. But as a labor leader, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about money for wages and also for pensions. Because there are many people in this room, and you know that many of your colleagues in education have not had wage increases that have kept up with inflation for the better part of a decade. And there's only so much that you can expect people to do, especially during a time of unprecedented inflation, if their wages do not keep up. And so I think Kathleen was right to highlight the amazing work that you've done in terms of maintaining the quality of education as measured by our test results, even at a time of scarcity, imposed scarcity. But people are breaking down.
So,
they may be so as a premier, there's no reason why a government can't budget for wage increases that keep up with inflation.
Yes.
I'm an employer. We do that all the time, and it's irresponsible not to do the same. We can't expect to attract and retain the people we need for the system without regular inflation adjusting. Yeah.
Thanks. Which is why I support the Waging Ahead campaign. It's also why I'm saying that public Catholic and Francophone schools should be the ones that receive public funding. And I don't know if you were able to hear the enthusiasm ahead, but there's enthusiasm in this room for that policy. So I'd love to know if all of my colleagues here who are running for leader of our party will join me in that, in making sure that those are the only school divisions, we can make rare exceptions for the very vulnerable private schools that they always trot out as examples. But I want a broad commitment that public Catholic and Francophone schools are going to be the ones that receive public funding from my colleagues also seeking the leadership.
Yeah.
I'd like to give a moment to Mr. Nenshi, please. I'm certain he might not be able to hear a lot of the audio. Mr. Nenshi, would you like to jump in and talk about public funding?
Thanks very much for that. Happy to respond to a couple of the things that we have just heard. The first one is, yes, I think that we really do need to talk about wages. We need to talk about what happened to teachers' pensions in terms not just of the actual justice for paying people fairly, but also for the very real issue of attracting and retaining people in the profession. You know, when I hear stories of rural schools where the population of the students has declined significantly, but they cannot fill the funded teacher positions and they still have giant classrooms because no one will come and work at those schools or in that area with other options available. That tells you that fundamentally something is wrong on the wage side. And similarly, I think I heard Sarah talk about, and tell me if I'm wrong, but I'm sure you did, talk about funding for private and charter schools. And, you know, I think that this is an area where we really have to understand that the public education system needs to be funded so that it is super attractive and people want to send their kids into the public system. And to Sarah's point, which I think I heard, we also have to understand that private schools are not all the same. And certainly there may be some argument for funding for specialized schools that are supporting students with very complex needs that the public system, for whatever reason, is not able to function. But that is not the same as a $40,000 a year private school. Similarly, the argument that charter schools are helping the public boards become more innovative has been true for a while. But when we're giving charter school licenses to UCP insiders and failed UCP candidates, and we're spending more money on capital development of charter school hubs than we are in public schools in Calgary, that tells you the priorities are wrong. And if the priorities are wrong, it means the policies have to change. And we need to have a conversation about exactly how to make that happen so that public school is adequately funded, period, and that the public system that we support is the very best public system in the world, period.
Thank
and
you
that's
so
going to
much.
take money.
So
gonna
will
just
you
have to
cut their
push back-
funding,
I'm
though?
just going to have to push back on that a little bit, because what I heard from
Actually,
Sarah
Gail, we
is
just
that...
have to move on.
Okay.
So thank you so much for your enthusiasm. The ATA has taken the lead to engage with local political engagement officers in Alberta to gauge questions and curiosity, and random questions have been chosen from the audience to be presented to candidates today. So in this round, we will direct said question to 2 candidates, and then we'll open it up to conversation. So feel free to jump in. I will jump in to keep you close to time and to give everyone a chance to respond. So Daniel Mills has a question.
And I will hand Daniel the mic.
Just give me 1 second to find it.
Time's up.
I didn't know I was going first. All right, let's go with this one. I had a number of staff members reach out and ask for specific questions. Would you consider capping student numbers in the classroom while also balancing education budget with streamlining of other non-teaching positions, including EAs, support staff, and all other education professionals?
We'll start with Gil McGowan, please, for 2 minutes.
Sorry, I'm sorry, I just want to make sure I understand the question. Are you suggesting that we find more money for teachers by laying off other support staff?
Nope.
Okay, I didn't understand. The streamlining is a word that when I hear that from employers, it makes me nervous.
I think they're asking about making more equitable access to those professionals and more supports in the classroom.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as Nahed said, this is an issue that's solved by money. There isn't enough of it, and that is an indictment of our province considering how wealthy we are. There's a disconnect between how much we raise in terms of revenue to pay for public services, including public education, and the strength of our economy. So if you look at other provinces, they collect about 17-18% of their provincial GDP to pay for public services. We collect only about 12 or 13%. That is actually a foundational problem in Alberta, and basically we've been using windfall revenue from oil and gas royalties to paper over the fact that our tax system doesn't collect enough money to pay for the basics. And I haven't released my revenue platform yet. It'll be the last of my 7. But I think that we actually have to have a conversation, especially as the time comes closer and closer, when we might actually see a change in the global oil and gas economy, and we can't count on windfall royalty revenue. So we can afford to pay for our public services, but we have to change our revenue system so that the money is there. So I think that a lot of the things that you've talked about in terms of funding teaching positions, EAs, supports in our school, we can do it, but we've made a political choice not to do it. We have a very strong economy. The fact that we have an impoverished public sector, including public education, is a choice, one that I think that we can make a different choice, one that supports public education. But
Thank you very much,
at the end,
Gil.
it goes down to revenue.
Sarah Hoffman, you have 2 minutes.
Sure, thank you so much. So I mentioned that my dad was a principal, mom was a teacher, so he essentially had to create a class size cap so people didn't think he was treating his wife differently than he treated anybody else. So he sat down with the staff and said, okay, Div 1, we're gonna make sure we cap at 30. If you hit 30, we're gonna split those classes in 2. And everyone on the staff agreed to that, and that meant that some of the Div 2, 3, and 4 teachers were gonna have to deal with larger class sizes, but they knew that that was an investment in each other. Which meant that if there were 29 kids, my mom would be knocking on doors looking for one more to sign up for kindergarten. So I think that it's important that we sit down at the table and that we negotiate in good faith, and I am very keen to negotiating class size caps. So that's something that I would like to work on with you, but if I have the honor of being your premier, I will sit down at the table and we will work on how we can land on reasonable class sizes together, because I don't want to pretend to be the expert. We have many experts in this province, and you certainly are the experts in knowing what's reasonable. And in terms of the support staff, 100%. And part of why we don't have enough support staff is because we're paying them poverty wages right now. And it's an investment, as Jody said, in all of us. It's an investment in our future. So let's make sure that we elect me as leader and premier, and then let's sit down at the table and let's fix this together, because absolutely, these are my values, they're your values, and they're the reason why my parents weren't keen on me becoming a teacher. And I want you to be keen on your kids becoming a teacher, because we've worked to solve these big problems.
Thank you, Sarah. We have 8 minutes now. Anyone can jump in.
Okay, I will jump in and just say, I think this is a super important issue. So one of the things I'm committing to is not just sort of measuring and creating standards around class sizes, but also complexity, right? Because those two things go together. Even if you're within a class size cap, if you have an incredibly complex, diverse learning need classroom, that doesn't necessarily solve the problem. So I think that those two things have to move together, and obviously it has to come with funding. One of the first things I committed to actually was to working with the union to get better pay for EAs and to get more access to full-time employment, right? So working standards are a thing that's pretty important to me. I was a union side labor lawyer, and I think to create those conditions where we can hire people, first they need decent wages. Second, they need to have access to full-time jobs if they want to have access to full-time jobs. And third, they need decent classroom conditions. Right now, I hear from educational assistants and teachers who have been bitten by their students, not because the students are bad, but because they're frustrated, because they can't access the learning because of the underfunding. So I think those are all, pieces of the puzzle that need to be taken into consideration.
Thank you,
Thank you
Daniel
so
Mills.
much. Actually, Mr. Nenshi put up his hand. He must have been a very good student in school. So could we go to you, please?
Thanks very much, and thank you so much for this question. When I met with Calgary Public as advocacy committee recently, I heard a lot of shocking things, but the thing that bothered me the most was when they were talking about, and I've been helping a little bit on political and bargaining strategy, and what bothered me the most is when they said, we're going into bargaining, not bargaining so much for our workplace conditions for ourselves, but we're going into bargaining for the conditions for the students. So we're going to try to bargain classroom sizes. We're going to try to bargain minimum numbers of EAs and so on, which is terrific and generous and big-hearted. But it really bothered me that these should be elements of bargaining rather than being elements of policy that really highlight the importance of decent public education. So, I heard Sarah say, if I'm premier, and people keep telling me I'm supposed to say when I'm premier, but I'm Muslim, so I'm not allowed to make positive statements about the future because I'll incur the wrath of God. So I'll say when I'm premier, inshallah, God willing. That means that this will not be something you have to deal with at the bargaining table. It'll be something that'll be embedded in the policy of how we run the provincial government, that we will not only cap class sizes, but hey, we'll actually report on them instead of not telling parents and others in the community what the class sizes are. And in an era of increasing classroom complexity with large amounts of immigration, meaning you have lots of English as an additional language learners, meaning that you're still dealing with post-COVID learning deficits, you're dealing with learning disabilities, and you're dealing with a lot of students who come from places with a lot of trauma. We need to ensure that your classroom supports are adequately funded with decently paid people and enough of them to help you in the classroom, whether that's paraprofessionals like speech language therapists or in particular education assistants who, as you all know, are the backbone of public education classrooms.
Thank you so much. We'll give the last word to Jody, please.
Thank you. Danielle, thank you for that question. Equitable resources, equitable funding. We have got to do better with our children. All of my colleagues have raised really important investments in our children. it's important that we have access for supports. We are seeing more and more children with neurodivergence. We are seeing more and more children that are reaching higher on the ACE score, which is not a great thing. So how do we ensure that these children are getting what they need to succeed? Through investment, through ensuring that we have counselors, that we have therapists, we have speech and language, that we are paying competitively, that we have elders on and cultural supports, that we are ensuring there's no diplomas when Ramadan is taking place or Yom Kippur, that we are respecting where these children are coming from and reaching beyond the schools, making sure we're getting into homes and supporting families, because it's important that that home relationship between teachers and families are nurtured and supported. It has to be a holistic approach that is invested in, because ultimately, these are our retirement plans. If we don't get this right, we're in big trouble when we're in old folks' homes. So we have to do better by our children.
Thank you so much, Jody.
Just want to clarify one thing.
Sure.
The reason why it needs to be in collective agreements and not in policy is so it can't be rolled back.
Yes.
We need to make sure that it's actually a legal binding agreement between employers and employees.
Yeah,
Thank you so much. We have to move on.
Okay.
In recent years, a new curriculum has been written and/or introduced across all core subjects in grades K to 6. What do you think of the curriculum changes, and what is your plan for curriculum development under your leadership? We're going to start with Mr. Nenshi.
I spent a lot of time with teachers and with parent groups talking about curriculum over the last couple of years. And, I started by asking, is there anything worth preserving in this curriculum? Is it a base that we can work from? And I was told in no uncertain terms, no, we have to ditch it. So I will be uncharacteristically short in this response. We got to ditch this curriculum. And we've got to go back to a curriculum that is based on best practices, that is based on helping students deal with the complexity of the world around them, developing critical thinking skills, developing great citizenship skills. The 2018 curriculum, I think, is a great base and start for that, but it too needs to be modernized. And I'll just highlight one more time, I cannot believe how much the UCP government takes us for idiots, that they treat citizens with such contempt. And the fact that they canceled the grade 6 PATs with 2 weeks' notice, with no real excuse, when everyone knows it's because they know that the results will be terrible because the curriculum is so bad and so badly rolled out in those core disciplines, and yet they think we're not going to notice. Citizens have noticed, parents have noticed, students have noticed, teachers have noticed, and it's time for us to have a curriculum that matches our aspirations to have the best public system in the world.
Thank you so much. Kathleen Ganley, the floor is yours.
So this is an incredibly important issue in terms of moving forward, in terms of developing our future society, our economy, everything. So I think with curriculum, the first thing we need to do is take the politics out of it, and probably do that by legislative mechanisms. So require that it be developed by experts, but I think there's a piece on implementation here too. We need to make sure that it's being rolled out correctly. The current curriculum was all rolled out at once. There was no professional development. Even assuming the curriculum had been good, how is that supposed to work? No one, I don't think, could have believed that that was the right way to do it. I have some opinions on why the government might have done that, but it's a real problem. So we take the politics out, we ensure that experts are developing the curriculum, we ensure that they're doing it on adequate timeframes, and we ensure that there's proper implementation, right? Part of that comes with the timeframes, having different subjects roll out at different times so people have the opportunity to learn the material and practice those skills before they go in. So I think there's a lot of things that we can do better on curriculum. I think the current curriculum needs a significant overhaul, and I think ultimately what we need to be focused on is critical thinking skills, not specific knowledge-based things, but the ability of students to engage, because the world is changing, and that's only going to get faster.
Thank you so much. Jody Callahoo Stonehouse, can you take the floor now?
Thank you. In my previous life, I was the executive director of Yellowhead Indigenous Education Foundation, and we created the first ever land-based curriculum, which we worked with the Forest School model in the UK and Indigenous pedagogy. And so I understand the depth of creating curriculum, and it's a tremendous amount of work. You need experts, we needed elders, and you need parents' involvement, you need student involvement, and you need the teachers. It has to be co-designed and co-created. Our curriculum also needs sex education. It is critical that we teach our children about healthy relationships, their bodies, reproduction. We want to ensure that they are making good decisions, consent. These are all critical things that need to be part of the curriculum. So we have to co-design the curriculum. We have to invest not only in ourselves, but in the experts, and then we build it. It's co-designed, and it also has to reflect the values of who we are as Albertans. How do we want to see our children reflected? How do we want them to enact and embody the values of what it means to be Albertan? That means our curriculum has to reflect who we are. It is going to take all of us to rebuild it. So we need your patience, your love, some more of your time and energy and dedication, but it's possible. It is possible.
Thank you so much. Gil McGowan, can you go next?
Thanks, Serena. There's an old conservative political axiom that you accuse your enemies of what you're doing yourself. This is an example of that axiom in action, because in the lead up to the election of 2019 and then in the aftermath, we heard over and over again that big changes had to be made to curriculum because the NDP had politicized the curriculum. But then we saw an unprecedented politicization of the curriculum under Jason Kenney first, and now continuing and maybe even accelerating under Daniel Smith. This is something that we have to call out in the context of what I described at the outset as the UCP goal for education. They want to turn it into a vehicle for not shaping minds for a changing future economy, but shaping minds for their political ambitions. And we have to name it. As progressive people, we're sometimes squeamish about talking about the hard tax of politics. But we have to get over that squeamishness and say that public education is under attack, and one of the places that it's most under attack is in their UCP's approach to curriculum. I'll just say this. Do you remember when Alberta was a best practice jurisdiction for curriculum? Do you remember when other jurisdictions used our curriculum because it was the best in the country? That's where we have to get back to, and the way we do that is by handing it over to professionals, including teachers, doing it on a regular cycle instead of all at once, providing a proper amount of time for piloting and professional development, do it on a staggered basis, one course at a time instead of trying to do it all at the same. We've done this before. We know how to do it. And we're off schedule now by 10 years because of the politics. If we're elected, and I can say this with some confidence, the Alberta New Democrat government will get curriculum back on track.
Thank you so much. Sarah Hoffman, you have 2 minutes.
One of my academic idols is here, Dr. Carla Peck. Thank you so much for your constant professionalism and expertise in education. Let's give her a round of applause. And I want to say that part of what's happening in Bill 18 is an academic attack on the integrity of post-secondaries and academic freedom, and it is intended to put a chilling effect on post-secondaries and then a chilling effect on K-12. This is by design, and we need to make sure that we have the backs of our academics. Professors were hired to profess, to teach, and to compel the public generally to know the truth about their expertise. So I think that we're really going to have to show, does everyone know about the Enough is Enough protests that are happening on the 25th? Here in Edmonton and all across the province. So just Google Enough is Enough Alberta protests, and you'll learn more about that. But this really is about trying to stymie the voices of academics and to stymie the voices of those fighting for intellectual freedom and intellectual property, and also for public education. So yeah, I was proud to be the education critic over the 4 years when we were in opposition and working with many of you to fight back against the curriculum changes. And you have my pledge that I will put experts back at the front of that process us, including teachers who are active in their classrooms, and that we will make curriculum boring again.
All right, thank you so much. We now have 8 minutes, and anyone can jump in. Well, Naheed, would you like to start us off? Go ahead, Mr. Nenshi.
Can you hear us,
Nenshi, can
Naheed?
you hear us?
No.
As we're
Sorry,
getting-
I've lost my audio again, so I'm just going to start talking and cut me off if I shouldn't be talking.
Yes.
Yes,
I
go
think I
ahead.
heard Sarah say that Dr. Carla Peck is in the room, and I should have pointed out that she particularly, but others as well, have done yeoman's work on pointing out the challenges in this politicized curriculum. And I'm deeply, deeply grateful for the time we've been able to spend together talking about these things, because here's the issue. This curriculum was politicized by the Jason Kenney government on purpose. It was a very long-range plan to really think about, well, it's the model of Texas, if I can sound a little conspiracy theory for a moment. Texas used to be a very purple state, and the Republicans in Texas took over the school boards and started to put a new curricula to the point where Texas now has its own textbooks. And the idea was a very long-term plan to basically have a less educated population. It's callous and it's very, very wrong. Now, all the motions that the current UCP government has made to soften the issue, to make it more collaborative. I did talk to President Schilling and others and said, well, did they take your advice? And the answer, of course, was no, they didn't take any of it. And so all of this is just window dressing. The core issue is still the same. And that's why when we have so many other pressing things about classrooms, about wages, about schools being built, as you know, the Calgary Board of Education got enough new students this fall for 22 new schools, and they had 1 funded. But despite all of that, the thing that we cannot stop fighting on, even in opposition, is the curriculum, because the curriculum is foundational to the UCP project. And we need to ensure that the students going through our system are trained to be critical thinkers and great citizens above all. And this is precisely what the UCP does not want, and that's why this fight is so important.
Thank you so much. Ms. Ganley would like to respond.
Yeah, I'm going to do a very NDP thing, and I'm going to agree with both Sarah and with Nat. Look, I really do think that this politicized curriculum is an attack on critical thinking. And I think that because I genuinely believe that critical thinking will lead more people to the NDP. But I do think, this is so important to our kids' future, right? It's not just about the economy we build or the health problems we can solve. It's about the democracy we're building, right? Right now, kids are faced more and more with an overwhelming amount of information, I'm going to put that in quotes, some of it's right and some of it's wrong, and without those critical thinking skills, they really aren't able to engage with the world at all. And we see that around us every single day. People who are skeptical of things like vaccines, of governments, of, just basic logic and reason. And it's incredibly problematic. Now, obviously, I'm someone with a philosophy degree, so I'm really into these sorts of argument things. But I really think that this is foundational and that it needs to be fixed, and I do think it's a coordinated attack. Sarah referenced Bill 18, which is cutting universities off from funding, but at the same time, it's paired with Bill 17, which allows them, the government, the UCP, to direct a research institute to do research on addictions and mental health, however they want it done. So they're both creating their own, doing their own research, if you will, and cutting off real research from foundation. It really does seem like an attack on critical thought.
Thank you, Kathleen. Gil poked his head around the corner.
Yeah.
He's next. And then Sarah.
We progressives are very polite, and I think what we've just seen is an example of the squeamishness, which I said we have to get over. So for example, Nahed said, I don't want to suggest that it's, sound like a conspiracy theorist. Well, guess what? This is a conspiracy. It's a political conspiracy. They're following a playbook that was pioneered in places like Texas and Florida. The conservatives have discovered through polling that people with higher education, with university education, tend or more likely to vote for progressive parties, either the Democrats of the United States, the New Democrats and Liberals here in Canada. That's actually one of the reasons I threw my hat into the ring as a candidate for the leadership, is because polling done by the Alberta Federation has shown that over the last 10 years, the New Democrats win often quite handily among people with university education, people who identify themselves as middle class, but we are losing among people who identify themselves as working class and have education, high school education, college education, or trades education. This is exactly the heart of the UCP's approach to public education. They're breaking it down, not because they don't believe in it or they want to save money. They're breaking it down for their own narrow political purposes. And we have to understand that it's a strategy. It's a particularly heinous strategy, and that's why I think we need to be talking about it, because most people, when they actually see what's happening, will be horrified by it. And that will actually help us defeat them in the next election. So it's important for us to get over our squeamishness, call it a conspiracy, name it, point to examples like Texas and Florida, say that we don't want that here in Alberta, and that will help us win the next election and protect public education.
Thank you very much. Sarah Hoffman?
Thanks.
You have 2 minutes.
I just want to tell you, there was a grade 4 teacher that I was talking to who was in tears because she said, the kids in my class think they're stupid because they're not succeeding at math. And I don't know how to teach them the curriculum in a way that they'll learn it. And that is not okay. For once a kid has convinced themselves that they're not smart, it's really hard to change their minds. You know that. So we deserve a quality curriculum that's evidence-based, that's created early enough that when we used to go to teachers' convention, we would see the resources for the next year's curriculum at the trade shows. Like, why isn't that the case anymore? Because the curriculum's being finalized so late in the year that you're expected to pick it up over the summer and figure it out for yourselves. Like, that's not okay. So I want to make sure that those grade 4 kids know that they're smart. I want to make sure that the grade 4 teacher knows that she's capable of teaching them the curriculum. And that means we need to get this right. We need to do it in collaboration. We need to sit down with experts like Dr. Peck and other academics, as well as those of you who are working in the classrooms today.
All right, thank you so much. We have another question from the audience.
I don't get to answer?
Did I miss you, Jody?
Oh,
Jody,
yay.
please.
Insofar as building on the curriculum, also we need to do the work of reconciliation. The Indian residential schools have got to be discussed in the curriculum. And I love what you're doing with your Walking Together. Thank you for that work. Reconciliation matters. And when I was the acting vice principal in one of the First Nations, I was dismayed that, can you imagine the school was not connected to Alberta Learning, that there wasn't a single graduate? We cannot have jurisdictional warfares where some children are getting Alberta curriculum and teachers are a part of the ATA and some are not. We are failing Alberta's children, and we have a systemic racist problem with our education plan and our process, and I will fix it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jody. We have another question from the audience, this time from Curtis Fong.
We have just changed it to Wade Westworth, please.
Okay, Wade, go ahead.
Thank you very much. So when the NDP were elected in 2015, many teachers were excited. After all, you spoke our language, you understood us and our issues. We had hope for the first time in a long time. However, as your term rolled along, many of the important issues, funding, class size, and complexity, and salaries saw little or no improvement. So my question to you is, how can you assure us that what we've heard today isn't just speaking our language without the intent to take action? Thank you.
And we're going to direct this question to 2 candidates, and since I missed you last time, Jody, could you go first,
thank
please?
Thank you for raising the question, and I'll apologize on behalf of my colleagues that they didn't do all the work that they had intended to. In 4 years, it's a very short time to be able to implement all of the things, let alone clean up the catastrophe that is there. So again, I'm going to ask you all to be patient. It is going to take all of us to clean up the catastrophic mess it's in. It is going to take time to rebuild the curriculum. It is going to take time to negotiate your contracts, to hire, to do the largest recruitment plan we've ever done. It is going to take time. So yes, we are not just lip service. Yes, we are going to do the things we have said we are going to do because we believe that teaching our children matters. We believe the future of Alberta's children matters. We don't want to be the lowest funded per capita. We want to be studied by around the world because our institutions of education are remarkably outstanding, and the rest of the world wants to know how we're doing what we're doing, why we do it, and how they can do it in their homelands. So you will not only see lip service, you will see action by the new Democrat government.
Well, thank you so much, Jody. Kathleen Ganley, the floor is yours.
Yeah, that's a really good question. In government, we did some things we are proud of, and we didn't get everything right. There was a record economic downturn. We did protect funding for healthcare and education in a way that the UCP never have. But you're right, on both of those files, we were very much sort of station-keeping custodians to a certain degree, and I think that if we get the opportunity again, that we will be more bold. So part of what I'd like to highlight is the idea of investment versus waste. So one of the policies I've rolled out already is a little bit fun. I've said that I would end the war room, that's $30 million a year, and that I would cancel the pilot on R-Star, that's paying companies to clean up their own messes, to the tune of $100 million.
Yes, thank you.
And that we would put that money into EAs. Because I think what that does for people is highlights, because the belief that most of the population has about us as a government, the NDP, is that we spent too much. But I think that what people need to understand is that there's spending that is important. There is spending on education. There is spending to support our future and our economy. And then there's wasting money, giving it to corporate friends like the UCP does. They're spending $1.3 billion gambling that Trump will be reelected and that we'll get a pipeline through that we were never going to get through, right? So there is money there. The UCP are wasting. Their proposal on R-Star is to spend $20 billion. Think about what that money could do if we spent it on education instead. So part of it is about, oh, sorry, thank you. Yeah, I think there is an amazing opportunity to do better. And I think that right now we are starting in the basement. And my commitment to you is that I will get us out of there. I will measure and report on class size and complexity. And I think that what that does is it puts pressure on people.
Thank you so much, Kathleen. We're going to have to move on to open discussion. And Gil was putting up his hand next.
Yeah, thanks very much for that question. It is foundational, and I'm glad that you put it out so bluntly. Frankly, the New Democrats did not do all they needed to do on class size, wages, general support for education and public services. And yes, there was a record economic downturn, but that probably will not be the case in 2027. So it is a very fair question. And the answer, in short, is it's about the money. And you know, there's a page in every budget that the provincial government hands down, and it shows the gap in revenue between Alberta and the other provinces. And the Conservatives brag about it, and they say, look, we collect, and this year we collect less than every other province. They call it the Alberta tax advantage, right? And this year, the Alberta tax advantage is $20 billion. And what that means is that if we taxed at the next lowest rate, which is Ontario, we'd collect another $20 billion in revenue every year. So we could increase our taxes by $10 billion and be the lowest tax jurisdiction in the country. We could increase our tax haul by $15 billion and still be the lowest tax jurisdiction in Canada. We could increase our tax haul by $19.5 billion every year and still be the lowest tax jurisdiction in the country. So as if I were leader of the NDP and if I were premier of this province, I would commit to bringing Alberta into the Canadian mainstream in terms of raising revenue to pay for quality public services, including education. There's no excuse. There's a disconnect. There's a deliberate disconnect between the revenue that we raise for public
Thank you so
services and
much,
the
Gil.
health of our economy. That disconnect has to be fixed.
Sarah Hoffman.
I'm just going to reflect on a couple things that I think we should all be proud of from that period of time. One is the expansion of school nutrition programs significantly, that there are far fewer children hungry in schools. The closing of the gap of, we cut the number of children living in poverty by half province-wide, which I know made a difference to education. But you're right that when oil was $26 a barrel, we didn't do significant action on class size or on salaries. We did maintain per pupil funding, which is already a step above where we are today, but that isn't good enough. I hear you. And that's why I'm so excited to be running in this race, to be able to be unapologetic about what my values are, to put them out there and to make sure that we can create more momentum around them heading into the next provincial election. And I also want to recognize that 2 Edmonton locals here showed When We Fight, We Win. Is that the right name? When We Fight. And the conclusion is we win. So there needs to be more public momentum. We saw the biggest gains to public education in the United States when teachers were united with parents and they were on the streets and they were creating huge action, which resulted in getting nurses put back in every single LA school, which resulted in having class size caps brought in. I don't want us to have to all be on the streets, but we have to make sure we're bringing the public with us, and I need your help in doing that, which is why we need to take the chilling effect off academics and off education experts in general. You need to be out there telling people the truth so that they can be on side, so that we can do the great things, because teachers' working conditions are kids' learning conditions.
Thank you so much. We'll go online now to Mr. Nanchi, please.
Thanks so much, and thank you for this very, very thoughtful question. And from what I've been hearing from my colleagues on stage, I agree that it is absolutely about the money, but it is not just about the money. I agree that we need to be working with the public with us, but it's not about taking our ideas and helping the public understand why we're right. It is about working to ensure that we are always focused on where the public wants us to be, which is the power of public education. So, look, you can be critical of the 2015 to 2019 NDP government, and I've heard people say, we elected an NDP government, why didn't we get an NDP government? But I get it. It was a government that was finding its way after 44 years of conservative government, that it sometimes was a bit scared of its own shadows. So when I say it's not just about the money, it is about the money, but it's also about the political will and the political savvy and the political smarts to be able to get the stuff done and to be able to prioritize what's happening. And frankly, none of this happens unless we win an election. And that is the critical thing we have to be able to do, is to help Albertans not just see that we're right and why don't you understand that we're right all the time, but to really understand what Albertans need and what they're looking for in terms of political leadership. And I'll give you a simple example of something that I think the government of which Sarah and Kathleen were a part did so right. This week we had oil pumping through the Trans Mountain pipeline. Of all their blather and all their talk, conservative governments in this country have never built a single mile of pipeline to Tidewater. It took Rachel Notley to get that thing built, with a little help from the mayor of Calgary, if I say myself. I worked pretty hard on that myself. But that single thing is going to increase the GDP of Canada by 25 basis points this year. In other words, we have handed Danielle Smith, with that one project, a bunch of the money she needs in order to reinvest in public education, and she's not going to do it. And that's why we need an NDP government that doesn't just talk the talk, but walks the walk.
Thank you so much. Normally in this space, we would have an 8-minute moderated discussion, but we have to move forward, and I'd really like to give the floor to another audience question. So Dave McKinnon is the next person to ask a question.
And here's Christine finally with the microphone.
Thanks, Dave McKinnon, Elk Island Local 28, and all your campaign teams have my email address.
Sorry.
We've heard the candidates talk about what they will do when, Shala, they become the next premier of the province in 2027. What do you consider to be the UCP's most damaging policy impacting the teaching profession, and how will you combat that in the next 3 years as opposition leader?
Thank you. Sarah Hoffman, 2 minutes.
Sure. So policy, I will say funding is probably the biggest policy gap. And I know that some people will say, well, what's the right answer? Is it weighted moving average? Is it not weighted moving average? Honestly, if we had
Thank you. Sorry.
equity,
I have someone in the room texting me saying, Serena just called on you, so here I am.
Actually, Mr. Nenshi, Sarah
now
Hoffman
I've
has the
completely lost my
floor.
audio, but I'm going to go with this anyway. Let me, there we go. Let me answer this question by saying, my God, it's hard to say what the single most damaging thing they've done is, because they've done so many damaging things. So I'll just say the systematic underfunding of public education combined with the shocking disrespect for teachers as a profession. But the question of what to do in opposition is really important. And, you know, for me, frankly, this is going to be new. I'm not used to being in opposition, but I can tell you 2 things happened this week. One of them was that the UCP put forward a shocking position on transit passes for low-income people. And we can speculate forever why they did that. I'll tell you one reason they did that, because I'm the one who created that project, and they were doing it out of spite. And so, quite frankly, we were able to mobilize people very quickly, even as I've been out of town, through my own means and through many other means, and they backed down within 24 hours. I've never seen the UCP do that before. Similarly, on Bill 18, on municipalities, they have pretended to back down. They haven't backed down at all, but they have pretended to back down, and that has required a lot of political organizing behind the scenes while I've been running this leadership campaign on my part and on the part of many, 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 many other Albertans. So the key is there is a way to be effective in opposition. There is a way to embarrass them. There is a way to make them back down. They've gone against me as mayor for 11 years, and I forced them to back down so many times, and I will continue to follow the same kind of philosophy to ensure they are always acting in the best interest of Albertans until we beat them, inshallah.
Thank you so much. And we're going to return to Sarah Hoffman. The interruption, obviously, because Mr. Nenshi is joining us virtually, and the audio, he can't hear us very well. So, Sarah,
Sure.
please.
Thanks. Yeah, I would say generally the attack on public education, and the crux of it is funding. That's probably the core. And was it Ronald Reagan who said, "Don't tell me what your priorities are, show me your budget"? I think it was Ronald Reagan, so I didn't expect to quote him today. But you know what their priorities are based on where their budget is. So the fact that they went after children with special needs first, the fact that they've gone after you and children who are trans in your schools and not allowing you to show them the respect that they're asking for around simple things. I know when I was trained to be a math teacher, I learned really quickly that your classroom management is best when you call kids by their names and the names that they want to be called by. And that's pretty simple. So taking away the right from you to even be able to do that simple thing to be able to support your kids. But yeah, ultimately I'd say funding is the biggest policy gap, curriculum second, the air quality in our schools. We need to make sure that we're building and modernizing air filtration systems to make sure that you can stay safe from things that can spread easily. But also, I know how many indoor recess days you had last year and that your kids could still taste the smoke when they were inside at the end of the day. That's not okay. So we need to make sure that we're investing, and all of that comes back to money and the things that keep you safe and your kids safe. But yeah, I'm going to work with you on curriculum. I'm going to work with you on making sure that every child feels safe in your schools. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. The floor is open. Anyone can jump in.
I'd like to.
Go ahead, Gil.
Yeah. So I love that question. Oops, sorry.
You don't have to, yeah.
Yeah, I love the question. And here's how I'd answer it. You know, politics is all about narratives. It's about emotion. And if I were the NDP opposition leader, I would have to mobilize narratives and emotion if I want to become the premier, right? And so on this question, my first priority would be to develop a full-throated campaign in defense of public education, stay on that campaign, make it central to what the New Democrats do in the lead up to the next election. And I just imagine this, okay? Like, we go down to Texas, we go down to Florida, we interview people who can tell us how they've politicized their system, how they've gutted public education, how families and students are suffering. and then say that's what they're bringing up here. That's what you would hear from me as a leader, is that do we want to become Florida North? Do we want to become Texas North? Public education is a cornerstone of success for students, for families, for our economy. Do we want to give that up? We spend too much time responding to conservative narratives. They're leading us around by the nose, right? And Trump's strategist Sven Gelly was famous for saying, flood the zone with shit. They've been flooding the zone with shit here in Alberta, and we've been jumping in every time they fill it, okay? So what we have to do is stick on a message, and that message is that don't let them turn our public education system into MAGA North. Don't let them politicize it. Show that they're doing this for their own political purposes, and people will be horrified by what they're doing and what we're losing. That's what I would do as a leader of the opposition.
Thank you so much. Kathleen Ganley, the floor is yours.
Yeah, so I think probably the most damaging thing is the cuts. But the real question is, how do we reverse them? One answer is we win, but the other answer is we strike at the fact that, I mean, people should be flooding the streets, right? Like, we are depriving our children of access to an education right now. We are the lowest per capita funding in the country, in the richest province. This is an incredible problem. So why aren't we seeing it? It's because the UCP tell a very effective story. They get out there and they tell people a story on the economy. They tell them if they give more to their bosses, that they'll have more in their own pockets. They tell them that the more we hurt the vulnerable, the more we cut from them, the more austere we're being and the better it is for our economy. And those things aren't true. So I think how we push back while we're in opposition is by telling a better story. And our story has the benefit of being true. We talk about how when you give more to those who have less, it does better for the economy. That's why I'm committed to a higher minimum wage. It's why I'm committed to a universal school nutrition program so that no child has to learn while hungry, is because we need to give the public something else. It's all very well to swing at every pitch, if you will, to attack at every opportunity, but that wasn't enough. It wasn't enough in 15, and it wasn't enough in 19. We need to give people a real offer on the economy, and we need to tell them the true story about how investing in each other is what grows our economy.
Thank you so much. Jody Calahoo, Stonehouse.
Thank you. David McKinnon from Elk Island. I wish I could tell you that there is a single damaging policy, but the reality is they all are damaging, and they intersect, and they're interconnected, and they are reflected in the lived realities of the classroom. If we look at the affordability crisis, domestic violence has tripled in our children's lives, which means that impacts the children that come into your classroom. Underfunding, of course, is paramount, but all of the policies in the way they intersect and interact are impacting the lived realities of our children in the classroom and your lived realities as educators. So there isn't a single thing that we can repeal. What there is chaos, and I don't even have a word for it, I'm sorry. But there is a tremendous amount of damage being done by policy, which means we are going to have to be patient, we are going to have to work together, we are going to have to be strategic to ensuring that we are repairing the harm so that our children thrive and so that you can do your job sustainably and that you are compensated adequately and competitively with those around the world.
Thank you so much. We're now nearing the end of our program, but I'd like to give the candidates 2 minutes to close out the morning and some statements to close out the morning. So Sarah Hoffman, could you start us off, please?
Sure. Thank you all so much for having us here today. It's my honor to be with you once again. And I want to say that I'm really proud to be part of this race, because I think what you're all seeing is that we all know that we can win. And the reason why I know we can win is because I've door knocked hundreds of thousands of doors right across this province, many of them with people in this room. And you and I both know that when we own who we are and we are unapologetic about our policies, people get excited. So I want to go door to door with you, being a bold, proud New Democrat, building this party and creating more teams right across this province with many teachers. So I hope a number of you in this room are thinking about running, because I think right now we actually have more lawyers than teachers in our caucus, and We need to fix that in the next provincial election. I love the lawyers, but we need more teachers too. And I do have to say that we win when we own who we are, when we are proud of our values, and when people get a chance to see that it's going to make a difference in their lives. Some of the ridings that we barely lost, we lost by 1,300 votes in the last election. And I spent time in many of those ridings. And I remember the single mom working 3 jobs who said, how is me taking an hour off work to bother to go vote going to make a difference in my life? And it was really hard to give her the concrete answers that she was looking for at that time. We need to be bold, we need to be brave, we need to focus on education, of course, but also healthcare, climate, and housing, and offer bold NDP solutions, and people will be motivated. Almost 1 million people didn't bother to vote last time, and they will absolutely vote when we offer them something bold and courageous. So I look forward to being able to do that work with you as your leader. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah Hoffman. Naheed Nenshi, you have 2 minutes for closing statements. Naheed, you're up next.
Perfect. I love that the audio has sorted itself out just in time for the closing statements. But thank you again so much for accommodating me and for the opportunity to spend some more time with Alberta's public teachers. You know, what I am excited about in the last 6 or 7 weeks is that we have created an extraordinary movement. The party is larger than it has ever been. Tens of thousands of Albertans have come out and they have said, we deserve better. But the thing that's gotten me really excited about that is it's not just because people are frustrated with this government. It's not just because things are so bad right now. It is because, as Albertans have told me from every corner of this province, as I've been meeting with folks, people are feeling for the first time in a long time a sense of optimism and a sense of hope, a true springtime here in Alberta. And that, to me, is what gets me really excited. And you've heard me say probably that my campaign slogan is for Alberta, for all of us. And I thought that that's how I would emphasize it, Alberta and all, because we have a government that is not interested in the province as a whole or everyone in it. But the power of that slogan has been that simple word for, F-O-R. And it's time for us to stop being against Ottawa, against the Prime Minister, against frontline workers, against teachers, against LGBTQ kids, against Indigenous peoples, against poor people, against newcomers, against environmentalists and activists, against oil and gas companies, against each other. It's time for us to be for something better. And I'm really grateful for these 4 people for stepping up and making me smarter every day as I listen to them and their passion. And I'm deeply grateful for you and your seva, your service that you do in the classrooms every day. I'm deeply grateful that my parents chose Alberta, that we get to live here, and we get to build an even better place for Alberta, for all of us. Thank you so much for your support. Let's do this together.
Thank you so much. Kathleen Ganley, you have 2 minutes.
Yeah, so thank you all so much for being with us this morning. I look forward to talking to more of you over lunch, and I think that we've had a really amazing conversation. So to sum it up, bluntly, we are the lowest funded in the country right now. Our system is held together by your incredible hard work. That's the only reason it doesn't show in our results. But we need to do better. We need to do better for you and for our kids, because I have a kid who has an incredibly big imagination, and I can see it in her eyes every day. And I think she and every student deserves better than what we're giving them right now. So my commitment to you is to build a team that will build schools, a team that will modernize our curriculum with the help of experts and roll it out properly, and a team that will ensure that we have proper funding for your classrooms, not just for class sizes, but also for complexity. I also commit to make sure that you get your pensions back and you get control of that back, because that is an incredibly important issue. In order to do any of that, though, we have to win. And we win by working together and providing people with a real and concrete offer on the economy. It's not about a tax. It's not about big personalities. It's about a concrete offer. And I commit to you that I will fight like crazy for public education because I have a daughter in the system. And as many of you probably know, there is nothing more tenacious than a mother fighting for her kids.
Thank you so much. Jody Callahoo Stonehouse, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you for showing up. Thank you for showing up when the kids are vomiting, when there's head lice in the classroom, when there's tears, when there's no food in the house. Thank you for showing up. You have one of the hardest jobs that we have in our province, and you continue to do it when your pension is being put somewhere where you didn't want it to be, when your wages have gone down and inflation has gone up, when resources have been removed, and you continue to show up because you care. And I care about you because our legacy is our children. That is our future. That means if our children are precious, so are you, the workers who, you are teaching our children. Our future is in your hands, which means you have to be invested in adequately and equitably. We have to make sure that children get the resources they need to thrive. That is our role as government, is to ensure we are doing right by our citizens. And absolutely, the most critical people are our little humans, our children. When I think about the teachings I was raised with by my mushum, it was about water is life, that was fundamental, but also that children are our future. They are who are going to take care of us. So we must do better. So thank you so much for all of your love, your energy. It is recognized, it is appreciated, and I will do everything I can to make sure that you get what you need to do the best that you can do for our future. Hi, hi. Oh, I just clapped for myself.
I was a shy rural kid in Alberta, rural Alberta, with a stutter. And there was a teacher named Ms. Yerasimowicz who pulled me out of my shell and set me on the road to becoming a broadcast journalist and the president of Federation of Labor standing in front of you today and a candidate for the NDP leader. Fast forward 30 years, my son was recovering from brain surgery and he was scared to go back to school. And there was a teacher named Ms. Latursky who made it possible to have the confidence to go back into that classroom and succeed. After talking with you and here and with many of the other colleagues, I know that all of you joined this profession, became teachers, so that you could have those moments, so you could be Miss H and Miss T. But because of underfunding, you've got your hands tied behind your back. And this is the reason that I've thrown my hat into the race to lead this party and to become the premier of this province, so that you can do what you need to do, so that you can do what you want to do, and so that students like me and students like my son can live up to their potential. That's what this leadership race is about. This is what the next election is about helping you do the job that you do, the noblest profession ever, to lift up this province and lift up its students. So thank you for this conversation.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you to the candidates for taking time out of their busy schedule, and for you for taking time to hear the candidates and their platforms. The next few weeks will be very busy for the leadership candidates. There are 2 general debates in Calgary and Edmonton. Good luck to all of you. Take care of yourselves. It's a busy time. Members will receive ballots by mail by June 3rd. Votes can be submitted by mail, online, or by telephone, and they must be received by noon on June 22nd. Thank you for allowing me to be a small part of this discussion. Closing out the afternoon or the morning, it's afternoon now, I now invite ATA President Jason Schilling to deliver final remarks.
All right. Thank you, Jason.
I realize it's me standing before you before lunch. So I promise to keep this short. Thank you, Serena, for moderating as well. I think we will give you some honorary teacher membership swag or something for being able to keep this class in order. So appreciate that. I also want to just bring thank you on behalf of my colleagues to the candidates for being here. I know how busy your schedules are. I know that when we met with some of you initially and proposed this date to you, we were all very eager to be here and made sure that your calendars were open and available to meet with the people in this room and to hear what they had to say and what their questions were. And I just want to talk a little bit about the people who are in this room. Because every person that you see in this room is a dedicated, highly trained professional who believes in public education in this province. And every single person that you see in this room is tired. They're tired of fighting for things that we shouldn't have to be fighting for. They're tired of having to fight for resources, for support, for decent wages, and to have their voices heard and respected. And it's not just when, if you become government and in power. It's also important to listen and to be respected while you're in opposition, and I'm really glad that we had that question posed earlier by my colleagues. Teachers here, like myself, are also tired of being asked for our opinions after the fact on curriculum, on funding, on gender policies. We are the people who are working day in and day out on the front lines of public education, who need to be asked before policies are put into place, not after the fact of how can you make this work? How can you do this without the funding? How can you do this without the supports that we need in place? So as I hear you talk today, and I'm really glad to hear your vision of what public education should be in this province and where you want us to go. But you can bet your bottom dollar that it is our job as the Alberta Teachers Association and the people in this room to hold you account to those words. And hold you account to those words and those actions is exactly what we are going to do. So thank you. Good luck in this race. We are going to go, I think I get to dismiss you to go for lunch, but I just also want to remind you that there's a viewing of that movie When We Fight in the boardroom if you're interested in doing that as well.
It's so good. Go watch it.
There we go. Okay, simmer down. There we go. All right. Thank you, everybody in here, for your thoughtfulness. Thank you for your time. And thank you again, Serena, for your work.
Yes.
Thank you, everybody.